Welcome to the Liberation Lab podcast, insights and interviews for the disruptive educator. I'm honored to have my sis on, but I'm going to let her introduce herself. Tell the people who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
Goodness. I am Ashley Lipscomb, give you my full name. I'm Ashley
Let them know.
Lipscomb. I am the co-founder of the Institute for Antiracist Education. But I'm more than that. I am family, I am sister, I am friend, I am godmother to my godchildren, Tati to my nieces. Um, I am daughter, and sometimes I'm a mess. So, but in all of those things, that's why I do what I do. I see myself as someone who's committed to ensuring that the world learns how to love human beings right. And the ways in which the world disconnects us from that love, I fight for it to be restored. I think that's truly the work that I do. So that's how I'm going to introduce myself today. So it's good to meet y'all.
Let's start there. Let's start with love.
Mm.
At the time of this recording, I just got through listening to, the Republican primaries kind of filtered out, and you have people kind of still in the race, but you hear their points. And one that really caught me was Ron DeSantis. Ron's talking, and he says that the Republican Party needs to be a party that is about color blindness. Yeah, we need to treat everybody the same, and color blindness, and really the argument is, right, you know what they do, they spin it. And so when we have measures in place to combat the racist ideology that keeps the glass ceiling, more specifically the concrete ceiling, from Black and brown women, when we have all of those things in place, they say, oh, well, we're going to take away those provisions because they ask for preferential treatment for people of color versus actually just opening the door to consider somebody who's qualified and a person of color. When I think about what he said and I think about color blindness, I feel like there is a huge disconnect there. And here's where I'm teeing it up for you. How do I love somebody who I cannot see? So when he talks about being colorblind, he means that he wants to treat everybody the same. But what if I don't need to be treated the same? What if I need to be treated differently because I've been affected differently? So my question to you, sis, is if we are colorblind, are we truly leading with love? And then secondly, what would be your advice to people who are facing that decision and trying to figure out, how best to proceed?
There's so much there in those two questions. Because we understand the political decisions right now that a lot of folks are making. I don't think it's just the Republican Party who's out here with the colorblind ideology, right? You got folks on the Democratic Party. Kamala Harris is one of them, who cannot say that America is a racist country, right? Nikki Haley has also been another one who has basically said, oh no, there's racism in America, but America itself is not a racist country.
Nor
Nikki
has it
Haley
ever been,
literally
she said.
said, like,
I said, nor has it ever been, she said.
right, that's what she said. There's never been a racist. It was founded for good purposes. And I'm like, my response is, it was stolen, pillaged. People were killed and murdered.
Right.
For the foundation that people say is open to everyone, all opportunities open to everyone. And so when I think about right now in this particular moment that we're all living in, we are at a precipice at a time where I think as a country we're extremely vulnerable to the very systems, right, that are out here trying to destroy us. And those in power have the capacity to do something about it. There's no reason why rent is for one bedroom apartment, almost $3,000 a month in certain places, even studios at that point. There's no reason why interest rates are so high that people cannot afford to buy homes. There's no reason why a box of cereal is now $7. There's no reason why you should leave a hospital with a bill of almost $50,000. None. And so we talk about a country that is colorblind, right?
Yeah.
And that means that it's not even that you just don't see us. You are deeply invested in keeping every single one of us harmed. You are invested and not doing the right thing to make sure each of us are able to live in this world whole and well. And so when we talk about color blindness, we're talking about a strategic political strategy that people are using to say we should all be on the same playing field. But that's not the country we're living in. That's not how it was established. I'm going to put that in quotes. That's not
Right.
how this country has been developed over time on the backs of many of our ancestors. And so we have to understand the ways that these systems have always worked against the most vulnerable people in our world, in our country right now. But we're not the only
Mm.
ones, right? We're looking at the ways in which America is extremely harming those in supporting bombs that are dropping in Palestine and Yemen, ways that we are supporting the enslavement of those in Congo, the ways that we are supporting the harm that's happening in Sudan. We have the resources to do all of these things, but yet there are people right outside in our communities that can't eat. We got student
Mm.
loan debt that can't be paid. And
Mm.
so I really asked the question, do you want to be a colorblind society where it's a meritocracy and everybody can get it, everybody can pull themselves up, but it's a whole lot of people out here who ain't got nothing to pull on.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah, sure. If we're gonna talk about it, let's talk about it. There is no
Yeah.
love in this work, right? There is no justice without love, and there is no love without justice. We really just recently celebrated Martin Luther King. Here it is. Even he has said before, like, love without power is just like frivolous and cute,
Mm.
essentially. I'm paraphrasing. But
Yeah.
justice without love that doesn't work for action, that's not real
Yeah.
either. And so
Right.
that's why, for me, I feel as if it makes the work 10 times harder when you say, we need these sort of colorblind policies. You need policies that correct the harms that are happening to us. So sometimes you do
Right.
need to recognize and acknowledge race. You need to recognize and acknowledge the ways that the constructs of gender are really stringent, exclusive, and harmful. Sometimes it requires that we name the ways that religious minorities and those who have certain particular religions are being harmed out in this world. So sometimes it requires noticing these things so that we can correct the ways that each and every one of these people are.
Yeah.
And so we're
Yeah.
really about loving people. We gotta do something about that. That was a long
Uh,
tangent, but hopefully.
no, you. This is right on. Right on. Right on. Why I wanted to have this conversation with you. I think to the point about truly loving folks. I think we want to love with parameters. We want to love with conditions. We want to love with qualifications.
Mhm.
And so I think about it in multiple ways. But when we talk about how uh, folks have been harmed, I think about something that I say all the time in presentations when I talk to folks, whatever, is the hood is not an accident. The hood was a
Yeah.
purposeful experiment,
Mhm.
you know, that America did with black and brown folk. Like that's why the hood exists. And so we talk about it and we criticize it, but then we act like the people who are in these positions just opted to be in the position.
Mhm.
They just said, you know what, I like this and I'm going to go ahead and stay there. And the reason that I say that is because I think too often we want folks who are experiencing harm and injustice and oppression to approach, to present in ways that are palatable for us in order to receive the the help that we can offer. Um and my point in saying that is we will rightly criticize our governmental leaders, the Kamala Harrises of the world who, you know, should know as a black woman, all right, to that of the injustice she's had to encounter, overcome in order to be in the position that she's in, right? To be the first, right? And I'm tired of firsts, but that's another podcast
Yeah, of
for
course.
another day. She should know. Nikki Haley, who won't even go by her given name because she understands the racism that is embedded in her going out and
Mm,
going by Nimrata. She knows what that means.
mm,
She knows that her own party won't ever
mm.
vote her in, and quiet as it's kept, people on the other side won't vote her in either. So, all of that to say, we will rightly criticize those leaders, but then that meritocracy, the myth of meritocracy, all of those things filter into our classrooms too. So we have children who we feel like all of them should approach the same way. They all should have the same, be given the same thing. They should all, um, we should have a color blindness in our pedagogy. So educators listening and say, yeah, you know, that's right. Those governmental leaders should be doing better, but then turn right around and teach their classes the same way that they are criticizing others. So let me ask you this: what does it mean to lead with a with love as an ethic of how you approach things? What does it mean to lead with love as an educator?
Ooh, that's hard. I think, well, it's not hard. It's easy, but it's always hard to hear. It's hard to say for some folks.
Yeah,
Um, it requires us doing the work that we need to do. I know that sounds real basic, but sometimes we forget that, um, especially as for young people right now, they're living in a completely different world than we were raised in, right?
yeah,
So where social media for us was just really starting to get popping. Right. I was on the phone, for Black Planet, and then there was MySpace, and then there was Facebook, and we got to grow and adjust with a different type of social media. It was really being birthed, like what it would be for. Now
yeah,
children are being raised, although empowered in some aspects, right? They can access the world in different ways than we ever could. They have access to information, to things that we didn't have at such a young age. And so
yeah,
the world is completely open to them where they're seeing the harms enacted against them and have language that we didn't have at a
yeah,
very young age. And so I
yeah,
think in order to truly teach a generation that's going to be even more impassioned about working for justice and changing the world, changing their conditions, a generation that's going to be impacted by this late stage capitalism in ways that we weren't. This generation is going to be impacted even more so by climate change, right? So, in order to say that we teach and love this particular generation that's come now is going to require a teaching that, number one, not only affirms their existence and who they are in the classroom, but also fights to change the conditions that they live in out in the world. Because it's a both
mm,
and. So I think a pedagogy of love not only says, when you come into this classroom, we are deeply about community and about care and about this, but it's also about teaching them accountability to each other. It's about teaching them how to assess misinformation, to learn how to hold that accurately. It's about providing spaces for them to unpack what's going on in the world. Love says it don't always have to be cute, right? But it should be
yeah,
done. There should be an attempt to change what is that they see. It's about
yeah,
giving them the tools they need to articulate what they need. It's about providing spaces for them to not only learn these skills, but to be able to practice them in our classroom. We should be able to teach children when we make mistakes, it's okay, we come back from them. This is what we do when we're trying to heal. Words like
Yes.
healing should not be considered, leftist propaganda, as it's been called recently. I never thought I'd see the day where something like healing could be such a bad thing. To say that
Yeah.
we want children to be socially and emotionally well, a generation that has lived through COVID-19 at such a young age, the
Right.
disruption to their growth and development. Why don't we want just a little bit more grace? And I know it's
Mm,
frustrating. I work with
yeah.
young people outside the classroom, and it's a lot to take in right now. I work with families who are trying to support their children who are making some risky decisions. It's a lot to figure out. Give yourself some grace too. You're not always going to get it right, but you should do it anyway. And
Mm,
to this final point, because we got folks out here legislating what types of history should be taught. And I know that risk of like losing income because you're deciding to teach the truth is a real one in the world that we're living in. And so I do want to acknowledge that. But there are certain things that are worth the risk. When I'm
mm,
talking to folks and they're like, oh, if I was around in the 60s, right? Or if I was around back then when people were really at the height of protesting to do the right thing, I'd be out there too. Honey, what do you think we are living in? Those leaders that y'all put on pedestals, some rightfully so, um, what did you think they were fighting for? The risk some educators had to take,
yeah.
the risk some people had to make. If you haven't read even things like Fugitive Pedagogy by Jarvis Gibbons, who even talks about some of the strategies that teachers had to employ, this ain't nothing new. It's a new form. But our forms
Yeah.
of resistance, the everyday resistance, that's a historical legacy that we all get to be a part of. And when I say we all, I mean we all, not just Black folks. Black History Month is upon us.
It is.
It's not just us. This legacy of resistance is in part of each of our histories. If we really dig into it, there are plenty of people who form coalitions that resist the powers that be, that are harming us. Like, we're trying to transform the world. And
Mm,
so that's what love in the classroom really looks like. How are we thinking about not only empowering students, providing the resources, providing the tools they need to live out in this world right now, but also doing something about the conditions they live in? What city council meetings are you going to? What board of ed meetings are we showing up to? And I know that's a lot because people out here tired. I get it,
so tired.
exhausted, and yet I still have to show up to my own city council meeting. Still have to
Yeah.
show up to my own family, to my own things. Still got to sign petitions and write this and do that. But that's because I love kids so deeply. And I believe
Mm.
in the organizing power of all of us to change the world for them.
When we think about that last part about the legislation, the the attacks on history, where history should and should not be taught. I think about also before it became a legislation, before it became something that was trying to be attached to a bill, um, it was stuff in people's hearts and minds.
Talk about it.
And so I remember everyone wanting to put up anti-racist statements. I remember the black boxes on social media in solidarity for Blackout Tuesday. I remember the book clubs. Everyone wanted to learn and everyone wanted to figure out how to be an anti-racist.
Mm-hmm.
I remember people talking about anti-racist education and tapping into the resources. Shout out to Dr. Bettina Love. Shout out to you and the work that you're doing, right? So I remember people doing all of these things, and then the book clubs became book bans.
Huh.
And here we are with
Let's see.
folks who won't even utter the name
Mm,
anti-racist.
mm,
They won't even say it anymore. It's something that quietly got muted out of the conversation.
mm.
So two things to that, and I want to cue it up for you this way. One, how, shout out to Deborah Cox, did we get here? That's one. And two, is if I'm checking for the pulse of anti-racist education, is it dead?
Mm. It's a threat, that's for sure.
Mm,
It's a threat.
mm,
And people are afraid. And I'm glad they're afraid. And I think that's a good place to be in. Let me tell you something. Is it dead? If you got into anti-racism in 2020 as a way to say, "Ooh, I'm doing the new trendy thing," because it's a trendy thing. Corporations got
mm-hmm,
behind it. It's if you
mm-hmm,
jumped on it then, yeah, it's done for you. Kudos to you who
mm,
was on the roller coaster. Now you got to get off the ride. You got to enjoy the whoo and the wind and the stomach drop. You got to have different opportunities. You got to be in front of people. You got to be on certain stages and certain
mm-hmm,
podcasts and IG lives. And you got to do all the wonderful things. But what you're doing now that it's under attack, and we really in the nitty gritty now, where people are losing resources for real. Where organizations like
yeah,
mine are struggling now to stay afloat because people no longer want to be a part of the real work. Folks have
yeah,
lost jobs. And I don't just mean at the universities. I'm talking corporations that no longer have DEI. People that I was coaching have lost their job because their
yeah,
departments are no longer useful. So then what do? Because we were doing the good work and became a threat to the folks who are trying to keep us limited. You were reading about that, right? You were reading about how systemic injustice was really harming a whole lot of people, and you were becoming empowered, and you wanted something to happen. You wanted to hold these corporations accountable. You wanted to hold schools accountable, and that became a threat. And anytime people organize for something and there is a threat, there's going to be a major whiplash and pushback. So when we don't
absolutely.
recognize or know this particular history, then we don't realize that we are in a pivotal moment where we cannot let, as we say, our foot off their neck. This is not the
There
time
it
for
is.
you to step back. You are a threat then. That's a good thing. Them pushing back, them writing legislation to try to silence us, that's because you were doing some good work. Don't give up now just because it got hard. Nah, we got to keep pushing. We can't just sit here and allow them now to control the narrative because that's what's happening. Oh, we were silencing
Yeah,
them now. The book bans happened. People had to lose things. So now everybody can be put in their place. Absolutely not. Because corporations were being held accountable for more than the ways that they were just racist. They were being held accountable for
right.
the ways in which they're stripping resources from our communities, from the very earth that we live on, for the ways in which they were disrupting order in other countries. They were being held accountable. Don't let up, because that's what they're banking on, that we would get tired and give in. But absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Mm,
This is what happened after, the famed civil rights movement. As we look at that history, you got more ethnic studies classes and departments and things because people wanted to learn more. People were
yeah,
invested. And then you get this huge pushback. So now you're going to get these laws and these policies come turn the 80s and the 90s. Right? You get
yeah,
the war on crime and then the war on drugs, really just a war on people here in the US because that was a threat then. And those policies lead to mass incarceration. And so we are in a time now where we had a mass, and I want to say this, global movement. This was this was not just in the US. We sparked a thing where people in the UK were protesting and organizing for us. You had folks in almost every single country protested and organized because they understood that our global solidarity as oppressed people, as people who are fighting for a new world to transform the world, we coalesced, we got together, we pushed back. That is a threat to the social order.
Yeah.
And so, is it dead now? It certainly has been attacked, certainly had to
Mm.
transform itself. So what are you doing now since they have coordinated their efforts? The long game is here. They have coordinated their efforts. They have used very similar tactics that have been used in like the Reagan era, that have been used in other time periods in our history. This is not the first that this has happened. It's the first that's happened for some of us who are adults.
Yeah.
We saw what happened when we were children and how it affected us. But now we are adults. It's our turn now. So what are we gonna do? We can't let our foot up. Absolutely not.
Mhm.
And so I feel like if you were like, yeah, I'm gonna tap out, especially as someone who's in closer proximity to power, if you chose now to bow out because it all became a little bit too much, shame on you. Shame on you. You should be
Mhm.
ashamed. Some of us do not have the luxury. We do not have the luxury to tap out.
Yeah.
Not when I gotta make sure my people eat tomorrow. I don't have the luxury to tap out. Not when I gotta make sure my nephew comes home alive. I don't have the luxury to tap out. Not when I gotta make sure my nieces get the education that they deserve. Because folks are fighting to ensure that they don't get access to that quality education. It is not a luxury I can afford. And so if some of us cannot afford to tap out, we need you to keep going. Keep going. I know it's difficult, and I know people talking about you, people trying to put you into a box, people threatening your opportunities. I know that's hard. But if I never see a big stage, if I never get the opportunities to book deals, if people never know my name, that's okay. Because I can go to sleep at night knowing I did something for the people I love. That's good sleep. I know I'll die knowing I did what I could in the moment. Don't let up. Don't give in now when we need you the most, because I refuse to allow them to think that they won. Never.
Mm.
And I know that if we truly love people, we'll do what we have to do. And our resistance to what's happening right now could look different for all of us, but it should look like you're doing something.
Mm.
It should look like you're doing something. And it's interesting. I'm gonna end with this because I know I be going. I'm a preacher, y'all, so you don't have to get used to it. And I'll end with this too. You know, I heard a historian say, I went to a conference and this historian said, it's so funny that people forget no one really knew who Harriet Tubman was when she was organizing. Because if she was so famous and so world renowned while she was alive, it would have really hindered the work she was doing to bring the people to freedom.
Yeah.
So for the folks who were looking for whatever you were looking for in 2020, because you were trying to do the work and get all the contracts and all the fame and thing, it really does show your character. And that's something you're going to have to do some deep reflection about, especially if you sit, again, in close proximity to power and you can do something. Right, but
I, the doors of the church are open. I appreciate you. I appreciate the power and conviction of the words you shared, and I think educators who are listening and tapped in, you know, they might say, "I don't have legislative power.
Mhm.
I don't have the power to fund. I don't have the financial power to fund. I'm struggling or whatever have you, just like everybody else. But you do have the power to make education human again. You do have the power to engage, to love, to work on the parts that you find hard to love in terms of those young people that you teach, that you have the ability to serve. You do have the ability to ask yourself reflective questions. Why do I respond like that
Mhm.
when this kid does this?
Mhm.
Why do I respond like this when my lesson doesn't go the way I planned? Why do I
Mhm.
You have the opportunity to reflect,
Mhm.
to refine, and to refocus yourself. And to your point about, is it dead? I think it only dies if you're truly about this work. It dies when you do. And my hope is that for our listeners, that there's a verse in the Bible that talks about not being weary in well doing.
Mhm.
And regardless of you know where your spirituality or faith lies, I do think that that's a principle that we can take with us. That there are going to be times where you feel like, I'm doing all of these things and it's not coming back or returning to me. I'm not getting the results that I thought it would. But are you doing the right thing?
Mhm.
And if you're doing the right thing for the right reason, is that enough for you?
Mhm.
Let's say it never changes. Is that enough for you? Or did you need to have a certain result, a certain affirmation or acclamation in order for you to be able to do this thing? I think that when people got into the trendiness of anti-racism and people got into the contracts that were handed out as a result of this anti-racist work that people were on, they got a shot of dopamine. There was a high attached to it. It was great. Business was booming. But now people got to think twice about whether or not they want to hire you. People are thinking twice.
Mhm.
Is the work itself to liberate and love and serve young people enough? Or did you need the other stuff? Did you need the shot of dopamine? I think people have to do some soul searching, because anti-racism is only dead if one, it never lived in you.
Yep.
Two, if you're really committed to it, it dies when you do.
Or it's passed on, right? Like, I'm also thinking
My
about
mind.
that. It's passed on.
Yeah.
Like, we, and I mean you, me,
Or the
all other
legacy.
people,
Yes.
we are continuing. We are building. As like these systems transform, so do our resistance and our efforts.
There it is.
And so you're right, it is in the everyday, right? It's in the
Yes.
small moments of you showing up in your classroom, like, you know what? I'm not really going to engage these punitive practices. I'm going to teach them about how to do communal work. Oh, I
Yeah.
understand that sometimes a lot. I'm going to incorporate some journaling here to get folks grounded, to help students to reflect on themselves. I'm going to incorporate some really helpful tools and techniques that I know help young people to ground themselves, to learn how to love themselves. These are small things that happen every day. I'm going to partner with somebody else in my building to host a program that meets with kids after school. That's I'm gonna work with somebody else to create a pamphlet to help parents know how they can advocate for themselves and their child with what's going on right now. That is creative energy. That's not saying it has to be done solely by you. That's I'm thinking about community. There are plenty of people who are doing multiple things where you live right now to change,
Hmm.
and you're not by yourself. So get connected. Yeah, we're gonna be exhausted. Yeah, we're gonna want to stop if you're not doing it in community.
That part. Yeah. Yeah. I think that part of the work, to your point, is, you know, your part in the race might perish when you do, but you get to hand the baton off to the next.
Right.
And are you okay with it not being as
Yeah.
lucrative, as wonderful, as you know, um, affirming as it was? Right? Are you okay with that? And what if the work you do prepares it for the next person for it to
Mhm.
be? What if none of that ever happens without you because you chose not to step up and do what it is that you knew
Right.
was right? Um, I think leading leading with love should lead to an anti-racist
Because you
approach
recognize
because you recognize the conditions that every one of us finds ourselves in. You recognize the systems that are at work. You recognize the ways that power, privilege, all of those things have been handed to some and kept away from others. And if you recognize all of those things, then love should lead us to work. And to quote Dr. Cornel West, right? It's, you know, justice is what love looks like in public. Ain't that something? Sis, I know we're getting short on time, and I want to honor your time. I appreciate you sharing space with us and with the audience. I want to ask folks to tap into what you're doing, but could you point them to how they can support you, particularly on the heels of the call to pick up the mantle and continue to keep working? How can they tap into your work, particularly on the heels of that?
Yeah, you can support us in so many ways. You can go to our website, antiracisted.org. You can look us up, the Institute for Anti-Racist Education. Join our newsletter where we tell you the multiple ways that you can help support us. We are currently in our fundraising cycle because we are building on the legacy of Freedom Schools right now. So again, Black History is upon us. It's one of my favorite months. And so as in history, our ancestors were creating spaces for our children to learn when policy said that they could not. We want to keep that going because I understand that schools cannot do it all themselves. So as an organization, one who loves education, I'm providing another opportunity for children to continue the learning that you give them in schools outside of schools too. So we are building our very first free 6th grade learning academy right here in New Jersey. It'll be in person, where students will be able to learn about what are the things impacting their community. How can reading, history, STEM all help them to do something about it? And so for free, 30 students will come to us for a month every day from Monday to Friday and get these sort of skills. And so we are fundraising for that right now. So if you know anyone who wants to support this sort of education, empowerment, skill building, all those things, kind of programs, send them our way. And if you want to donate, you can do so on our website. You can also come to our Black History panel, which happens every year, Creating Loving Schools for Black Students, happening on February 15th. I believe that's the Thursday, so y'all come through and support us. Bobby has been a guest on that panel for several times.
I'll be there this year too.
I gotta start bothering Bobby. I'll always be like, could you do this? Wait.
Oh man, you know it's family out here. We gonna do it.
Absolutely.
That's why you show up for me. I show up for you, fam. That's how it works. Absolutely. Listen, disruptors, please tap into the work that Ashley is doing. Please support. Please give. I think that if we're going to be called to really lead with love, then we look for opportunities to engage, and this is one that's before us. So all that will be in the show notes. Please click the links below and see if you could partner, collaborate, serve, give your time, talent, and treasure to something that is worth it. And until next time, man, we appreciate y'all, and let's keep pushing.